You lie in bed, the weight of your own body unfamiliar. It's not just the swell beneath your ribs or the quiet pulse inside your belly, it's the invisible gravity of something vast and unstoppable. A force that has begun, without your permission, to unravel who you thought you were. They call it expecting, as if you've merely ordered something online, as if the terror that snakes through your thoughts at 2 a.m. is some kind of clerical error. You are told, often and gently, to trust the process. But how do you trust a process when you don't understand the rules of the game? When even the rules seem to shift every week, your own body becoming a cipher you can no longer decode? No one warns you about the quiet kind of fear, the fear that doesn't come screaming, but slinks in through cracked windows. It looks like insomnia, like obsessive scrolling through birth forums where every story is either bliss or horror, never something in between. It sounds like your own voice asking, again and again, what if I can't do this? What if something goes wrong? It feels like betrayal, your brain turning against your body turning into something unknown. You begin to notice how often people speak in euphemisms, discomfort instead of agony, surge instead of contraction, a journey instead of a surrender, and always this brittle smile. But it's all worth it in the end, is it? That's the forbidden question, isn't it? The one you whisper into the bathroom mirror when the door is locked and the house is finally quiet. The one that makes people look away when you ask it out loud, as if by naming it, you've cursed something sacred. But fear doesn't dissolve just because you're told to be positive. In fact, it festers in silence. And so you start rehearsing, not nursery rhymes, but worst-case scenarios. You imagine the drive to the hospital, white-knuckled and wild-eyed. You visualize the sterile room, the bright lights, the masked strangers telling you to push. You see the monitors, the numbers, the beeping. You hear your own voice rise into a frequency you don't recognize, half animal, half child. You wonder if you'll scream or go silent, if your body will shatter or if it will disappear completely. And the most terrifying part? You won't know until it happens. This is the cruelty of it, the uncertainty. You can train for a marathon, practice for a speech, study for an exam, but there is no rehearsal for birth. It is an initiation without preview, a threshold crossed blindly. And you, who have always relied on knowledge, preparation, control, are now asked to let go. Not because you want to, but because you must. The paradox is unbearable. You are both the architect and the hostage, the portal and the prisoner. And in that paradox, fear grows wild. You start asking people, quietly, carefully, about their experiences. Some respond with glowing nostalgia, like the pain has been edited out. Others pause, eyes clouding over, and say, I don't want to scare you. Which, of course, scares you more. You begin to realize that society has no language for this in-between place, the space where excitement and dread, hope and helplessness, coexist like oil on water, where you can long for the child and still fear the birth, where love and terror are not opposites, but twisted vines growing from the same root. And what about the stories that don't get told? The emergency cesareans, the postpartum hemorrhages, the labors that stretch into days, the people who don't feel instant love, the ones who leave the delivery room not just with scars, but with silence. They're not featured in the parenting books. They don't make good Instagram posts. You wonder what it would feel like to talk about these things without shame, to say, I'm afraid, and not be dismissed or consoled, but met, not with platitudes, but with presence. And still, beneath the fear, deeper than words, there is something else. A flicker, not of certainty, but of recognition, that what you're feeling isn't weakness, it's awareness, of risk, of change, of truth. Because to birth something, anything, is to agree to be remade, to surrender to the possibility that who you were before may not survive the process. And maybe that's the real fear, not the pain, not the blood, but the erasure, the shedding of the known self, the question that lingers long after midnight, who will I be on the other side of this? And what if I don't recognize her? You begin to notice the small shifts first, how you no longer trust silence the way you once did. How a moment of stillness in your body makes your heart spike, your mind whispering, is everything okay in there? It's a strange intimacy, to be bound to a mystery you can't see, only feel. Every flutter, every stretch, every hiccup of movement becomes a kind of Morse code, and you're constantly decoding it, unsure whether you're overreacting or not reacting enough. But it's not just the physical ambiguity that gnaws at you, it's the psychological one. You are becoming something else, and everyone expects you to be okay with that, to glide from woman to mother with some ethereal grace. No one talks about the dissonance, the emotional vertigo of standing at the cliff's edge of transformation and not being allowed to look down. They say, listen to your body, but how do you listen to a body that's turned alien? A body you thought you understood, now pulsing with an agenda of its own. You try to track the changes, to map a narrative onto them, but the truth is, there's no linearity here. Some days you feel powerful, primal, other days, you're a trembling mass of nerves, Googling symptoms until 3 a.m., desperate for reassurance from strangers in forum threads. You're told fear is the enemy, that it leads to tension, which leads to pain, which leads to complications. And so now, in addition to the original fear, you're afraid of your fear. You wonder, am I sabotaging my own birth? Will this anxiety make everything worse? This is how it becomes a hall of mirrors. You fear the birth. You fear the fear. You fear the judgment about the fear. And the worst part? No one sees it. To them, you're glowing. A walking miracle. A vessel. They touch your stomach like it's communal property. They smile with the kind of reverence reserved for saints or sacrifices. And you want to scream, I am not okay. But you don't, because you've learned the rules. Don't be dramatic. Don't be negative. Don't say the wrong thing and ruin the illusion. Instead, you try to prepare. You read the books. You make the playlist. You write the birth plan and then rewrite it again and again, as if you can bend the future with the right combination of bullet points and breathing exercises. You download meditation apps. You buy essential oils. You practice hypnobirthing, willing yourself to believe that peace can be programmed. But some nights, none of it works. Some nights, you wake up sweating, convinced your body will betray you. You picture your uterus turning on itself, your pelvis refusing to open, your heart pounding out of rhythm while the rest of the world keeps sleeping. You feel like a time bomb no one else can hear ticking. So you begin to reach further. You look for stories, not the glossy kind, but the raw ones. You find forums where people admit they were afraid. Women who cried in triage, who screamed during labor, who dissociated, who begged for epidurals they'd sworn they didn't want. You read these stories like sacred texts, not because they calm you, but because they make you feel less alone. You start to wonder if the fear is not something to be conquered, but something to be acknowledged. What if it's not a problem, but a signal? A form of reverence for what your body is about to endure. Because birth is not a Disney montage. It is blood and rupture. It is euphoria and despair sometimes living side by side. It is the most biological and the most spiritual thing you will ever do, and how can anyone be expected to walk into that without trembling? And so, slowly, you shift your gaze. You stop trying to be fearless. You begin to ask, can I be afraid and still be okay? Can I feel terror and not be destroyed by it? This is where the work begins, not in eliminating fear, but in making space for it. You start to breathe with it, not around it. You let it sit beside you instead of shoving it into a locked drawer. You begin to whisper to yourself, this is fear, but it is not prophecy. This is fear, but it is not failure. You talk to your partner, your midwife, your closest friend. You tell them what you're afraid of, not just the pain, but the feeling of losing control, the fear of tearing, of not being believed, of making a choice you'll regret. You say it out loud, and no one dies. The sky doesn't fall. Instead, they nod. Sometimes they even say, me too. And then something begins to shift. The fear doesn't vanish, but it softens. Because it has been seen, you realize something else too. The fear is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of your initiation. Your vulnerability is not a crack in the armor, it is the doorway. And that doorway does not lead only to pain. It leads to a version of yourself that is still being forged. A version who will walk through the fire not because she isn't afraid, but because she learns to walk with it anyway. The truth is, this fear might never fully go away. But maybe it's not meant to. Maybe it's the echo of something ancient in you that remembers the cost of transformation. And maybe, just maybe, the real courage isn't about eliminating the unknown. It's about standing at its edge, heart racing, hands shaking, and stepping forward anyway. You come to realize that fear isn't the villain, it's the midwife of clarity. It doesn't just haunt you in the shadows, it reveals what matters most. In those quiet hours of dread, when your breath is shallow and your mind spins endless loops of what ifs, a fierce, defiant love rises. Not the soft, pastel kind sold in baby catalogs. No, this love is feral. It has teeth. It says, I am afraid, and I will still protect what is coming. You look again at the stories you've gathered, not the sanitized ones, but the real ones. The ones where people screamed and swore and bled and still called it holy. You start to recognize a thread that ties them together. Resilience. Not the kind that marches in with a superhero cape, but the quieter kind. The kind that curls into a ball on the bathroom floor and still shows up the next day. You ask yourself, is that what power looks like now? Not domination, but endurance. Not certainty, but surrender. Birth is a paradox. It is you becoming more and disappearing all at once. Everyone is waiting for the baby, but no one tells you that you will be born too, and rebirth, in any form, is a breaking. So you prepare, but differently now. You stop trying to hack your way out of uncertainty. Instead, you gather tools not to control the storm, but to anchor yourself within it. You talk to a therapist, or a doula, or the older woman down the street who says things no book ever will. You write letters to your unborn child. You write letters to yourself. You start to collect phrases like talismans. You are allowed to take up space. You can say no. You do not need to be brave to be strong. You study the cascade of choices. Epidural. No epidural. Home birth. Hospital birth. Planned C-section. You learn that no path is wrong if it's chosen with awareness. You give yourself permission to change your mind, to grieve what you wanted, to celebrate what you got. You rehearse saying things in case the moment comes when you forget how. I don't feel safe. I need a moment. I'm scared. Help me. These are not admissions of defeat. These are incantations of agency. The closer you get to the due date, the more you feel the edges of the world blur. Time warps. Your body becomes a site of construction and mystery. You dream of oceans, of tunnels, of doors that open into light. You feel like something is coming, but not just a baby, a reckoning, a rising. And then it begins. Not in the dramatic Hollywood fashion. No water breaking in the grocery store. Just a strange rhythm in your pelvis. A whisper from within. The slow tightening of time. You tell yourself it might be a false alarm, but somewhere, in the marrow of your bones, you know, the threshold is opening. The hours that follow are strange and distorted. You lose track of language. You move like a creature remembering some ancestral choreography. Your breath becomes the only thing you can count on. Out, out. You forget the rules. You forget the books. You forget who you were. You enter the place beyond thought, where fear and strength are no longer opposites but lovers, tangled in each other's arms. There are moments you think you won't make it. You say it out loud. I can't do this. And someone, your partner, your midwife, the nurse with kind eyes, says, you already are. And something inside you breaks open, not with pain, but with truth. You realize in that moment, the fear was never trying to stop you. It was trying to prepare you, to wake you, to tear down everything false so only the essential remained. And finally, after minutes or hours or eternities, you cross through. There is no script for this part. Some people weep, some people laugh, some are silent, too stunned to speak. The baby is here, yes, but so are you. Changed. Irrevocably. You have done the impossible. You have shattered and emerged. You are wrecked and radiant all at once. And now comes the part no one warns you about, the aftermath. Because birth doesn't end in the delivery room. It echoes. In your sore muscles. In the milk that leaks at midnight. In the flashbacks. In the dreams. In the way you look in the mirror and don't fully recognize your reflection, not because you've lost yourself, but because you've expanded beyond the version you thought was final. There is grief in that. Yes, grief. Even in joy. Grief for the innocence left behind. For the body you once knew. For the control you had to surrender. You might cry without knowing why. You might feel rage, or nothing. And all of it is okay. All of it is normal, because birth is not just physical. It is spiritual. It is psychological. And it will ask you to revisit every corner of yourself you tried to avoid. Your fear of pain, your relationship with control, your inherited beliefs about worth, sacrifice, and love. But here's what's wild. That fear you carried, the one you thought was weakness, it becomes wisdom. It teaches you how to hold space for yourself, how to advocate, How to endure ambiguity without shutting down. It teaches you that survival and surrender are not opposites, they are sisters. And if you choose to share your story truthfully, unapologetically, you might just become someone else's lifeline. A flicker of light in their long, dark night. A reminder that fear is not a sign you're broken. It's proof that you're awake. Because to fear birth is not to fail at it. To fear birth is to honor it, and to walk through that fear and come out the other side. That is the kind of power no one can ever take from you. Not now, not ever.